everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and this is Superhero Rewind. It's always hard to do justice in a review to a movie I don't have a lot of history with. I used to like the Spawn movie a lot more before I was a Spawn fan, and I may or may not like Hellboy as much when I finally get around to reading some Hellboy comics. I was never a Shadow fan. I haven't heard more than a few clips of the radio show, haven't read the pulps, and I hadn't seen this movie since I was a kid back when it came out. But it is a lot of fun to do a review like this because I have no idea what to expect, and I have the chance to be surprised, which is rare for me because I'm familiar with so many films in this genre. Who knows what awesomeness lurks within the hearts of underrated superhero movies? Captain Logan knows. I really liked this movie. It has that ultra-stylized representation of the past. This isn't really what the 1930s looked like, but it's viewed through a nostalgic lens, and much like Dick Tracy or Sin City, it creates a brand new world based on an old one. The Shadow is fun and sometimes very over-the-top, but not in such a way where you can't suspend your disbelief. It's also at times very clever, and it's evident that the people involved had an appreciation and affection for the source material. The film opens by turning the superhero genre on its head. Instead of seeing the hero do something heroic to establish that he's the hero, he does something terrible. And if you don't know this is later going to be the Shadow, you might think it's establishing the villain. Lamont Cranston starts out here as Ying Ko, an ex-American soldier who lives in Tibet and thirsts for power, slaughtering people to get whatever he wants. He's kidnapped by a powerful man called the Tulku, who forces him to change his evil ways and teaches him how to cloud men's minds. The film then cuts to 7 years later, and we see Cranston as the Shadow, saving a man from being dropped into a watery grave by some thugs. As the Shadow, Cranston uses the mental powers he's learned to stop criminals and enter a path of redemption. I liked that the movie gave us an explanation for the Shadow's powers without the whole thing being an origin story. Once we get past that teaser and into New York City, we find that rumors have been going on about the Shadow for a while, so this isn't his first adventure. The plot centers around the Shadow battling the last descendant of Genghis Khan, called Sherwin Khan, who was also mentored by the Tulku, and he tried to reform him just as he did the Shadow, but he failed. Khan killed Tulku and set out to finish what Genghis Khan had started, to rule the world. So the Shadow has to fight a foe who is very much the man that he used to be. This film uses a lot of superhero movie cliches, though it could be argued that there weren't yet enough superhero movies for them to be cliches yet, but it often makes them less cliche with common sense. For instance, we've got a world domination plot. The villains are always wanting to rule the world, but this guy is the descendant of Genghis Khan, a real-life villain who really did want to rule the world, and got halfway there. It runs in the guy's family. He's got one of the best world domination motives ever. It's his family legacy. He almost takes for granted that he does evil things, like he just has to talk people into killing themselves due to his career choice. He talks to Cranston like what he used to do and what Khan does now is a legitimate profession. Khan looks up to Cranston because he was once the best at what he did. Cranston was so good at conquering, maiming, and killing that he is Khan's inspiration. I really love this idea. Not only are the hero and villain two sides of the same coin, which is always an interesting psychological idea and one of my favorite themes in superhero movies, but the Shadow takes it a step further by having Cranston truly create his own antagonist. It isn't like other superhero properties where the hero makes the villain because he does something to the villain, so now he wants revenge, like a lot of Spider-Man's villains. Cranston created Khan because he used to be Khan, and now he has to stop him while fighting the fact that that evil is still inside of him. One of the best scenes is a dream, and I can't believe I just said that because good dream sequences that aren't corny are so hard to pull off, in which Cranston pulls off his own face to reveal Khan underneath. And this leads to another big cliche that the movie pulls off in a way that also makes sense, the idea that the villain wants the hero to join him. This is usually a little silly because there's no reason the hero would turn his back on everything he believes in to suddenly start hurting people. There's no reason to ask Spider-Man or Superman to help you rule the world, no matter what you can offer them, because they're too noble. But this guy left the US Army to become a warlord and create an underground empire based on selling opium. He's no Clark Kent. So when Khan asks Cranston to team up with him, what he's really saying is, this is who you are. He can read Cranston's thoughts and emotions because he has the same abilities Cranston has. He learned all the same things before he killed the Tulku. And so he knows he still has the capacity to turn away from his life as the Shadow and become that warlord again. He even gives him another chance after Cranston denies him the first time. They have some great banter, too.
You cannot defeat me. Your mind is an open book to me.
Then learn how to read.
I was shocked this movie pulled off a fun and intriguing villain. I really expected something generic and silly, and I was pleasantly surprised. The love interest is happily well integrated into the plot, and not just there because the movie needs a pretty face, even if that is one of her functions. Another pitfall a lot of these movies fall into is that the hero falls in love with a woman simply because she's the big female character the writers decided should be in the movie. It's often a little convenient. Now, it maybe is convenient that Cranston manages to run into a beautiful woman with telepathic powers, but it makes sense that he would immediately be enamored with her since she does have telepathic powers. One thing I don't get, and maybe somebody can explain this to me, is why Cranston's ability to cloud men's minds doesn't work on Margot, but Khan's does. Khan seems to mind-wash her as easily as he does everyone else, and tells her to kill Cranston, which she tries to do. But earlier, when Cranston tries to use his abilities on her, they don't work. There's talk of some kind of connection between them, and it seems her telepathy really only works on Cranston, but it's not really explained, and I don't get it. I couldn't believe all the awesome names in this movie. You get Ian McKellen, that's Sir Ian McKellen now, and Tim Curry. Fantastic casting. Only trouble is they're both sadly underused. They both play scientists. Tim Curry is a crazy mad scientist who is the only person who willingly follows Khan without being mind-controlled, and he's really two-dimensional and doesn't get nearly enough to do besides act really goofy. It's a Tim Curry typecasting too, but still not nearly as fun as the roles he usually plays. Check him out as the butler in Clue. He's hysterical. And Ian McKellen plays Margot's father, who is an absent-minded, forgetful, senile old man who Khan uses to build the first atomic bomb.
I guess you'd call it an explosive submolecular device.
Or an atomic bomb.
Hey, that's catchy.
It's kind of a waste of McKellen's talents, but he gets some funny moments, especially when he can't decide which wire to cut on the bomb since he's red-green colorblind. Oh, and the bomb defusing scene, okay, that's a superhero cliche that's done really exactly like it's always done. And Alec Baldwin is one of those actors who sounds weird for a part like this because he's well known and it's hard to imagine him in a superhero costume, and then he ends up being perfect for the role. Now, I don't know if he's perfect for the Shadow, if the Shadow was done more faithful to the source material, but he's certainly perfect for the part created in this movie. He looks like he belongs in the 30s, and I really enjoy how he plays Cranston, Yingko, and the Shadow all differently. I love the voice he uses when the Shadow is invisible and menacing his enemies. A side note, for you Trek fans, Ethan Phillips, who plays Neelix in Voyager, has a pretty cool cameo in this film, playing the first person who Khan mind controls to kill himself.
Sacrifice yourself to me.
Yes, my Khan.
There's some good fan service to Shadow fans, and certainly a lot that I wouldn't catch since I'm not one of them, like references to radio shows.
You know, I think they just made up the Shadow so people would listen to the radio more.
And it's a very clever movie that knows how to be serious when it needs to, but has a sense of humor and is rarely lame.
By love, Broadway.
It's all falling into place for me now. Shi-Wan Khan needs a beryllium sphere to complete the bomb.
I don't know, maybe that's corny, but I thought it was hilarious. So this movie was mostly panned by critics and fans, and it barely broke even at the box office. I can understand why. I mean, I liked it, but not necessarily because it was The Shadow. I think a much better Shadow film can be made, one that's grittier, more cerebral, one that has the Shadow as a more mysterious figure, where we don't completely understand his background or how his powers work, and where we're as perplexed and mystified by him as his enemies are. That's the tone the radio show and Pulp seem to have had that the movie was lacking. It's a special effects movie, and while the special effects are pretty good, this just wasn't really the appropriate property for a summer blockbuster. It doesn't make it unwatchable, but it does make sense why it wasn't successful. This movie was marketed like a superhero movie, when it probably would have worked better if it had been produced and then marketed more as a gritty pulp mystery. There are these odd money shots of the Shadow looking dramatically at the camera or flailing his cape that, while they look cool, look like they're intended to sell action figures, and yes, there was a pretty big marketing campaign for this movie, despite it not being very successful. I'm going to give The Shadow a 3 out of 4. I I don't know if I would have liked it nearly as well if I were already familiar with the character, but it certainly succeeded in making me more interested in the Shadow, despite knowing he's quite a bit different from his other portrayals, and I imagine I'll listen to old radio shows and read some of the pulps now. It's a solid, fun ride, which seems to be exactly what it was going for.
Bye.